busting private sector and public sector myths and realities.
Let's start here. Chapter 1 on the Young Turks podcast.
I'm actually honored that you called me for the Young Turks series.
Because you're young at heart and you're not willing to give up.
I have written a book called Indomitable, and I see a range of hills, still waiting for me to climb.
I want you to recount the day that you walked into the State Bank of India.
You cannot believe, just trying to add 25 rows of numbers, like 4 and 5 started making 7 and 3 and 2 started making 6. End of the day, my face was filled with black streaks. And then somebody comes and suddenly opens my drawer and plonks something in and goes away. So I wondered what it was. I opened it and it was a packet of, jhalmuri.
Things that we take granted today, bathrooms and so on and so forth. We've heard these stories, but that was the reality then for a woman.
Absolutely the reality. In fact, in that particular branch, there were bathrooms that were labeled as women, ladies and gents and executives. I was supposed to be executive. I was also a lady. Which one do I go to?
Not just the first woman banker, but the first public sector banker in India after 70 years of banking in this country to be awarded the Padma Shri.
We have taken servers on the back of elephants to various branches. We've taken, servers on boats to Lakshadweep and the Andaman Islands, literally, braving the waves. So we've done all of this, but there's never been a person that's been acknowledged from that sector. I hope that this opens the gates, so to speak. The people on the interview committee were a little disappointed that NPA wasn't the first on that list.
To come back to the point that you actually made in your book, very often that acronyms are thrown about. So yes. we're going to de-jargonize NPAs. We're talking about non-performing assets.
Today, it's not only banks that are your competitors.
No.
There are so many others.
Apple is your competitor.
Exactly. How do you keep ahead of the game? All of these fintechs, they have technology, they have solutions. They look at particular pain points of a customer and address that pain point. And that's how they get their customers. These are pain points that the banks know about. But it's a take it, leave it attitude.
Yeah. Where do you believe that this second-guessing business comes from?
When we were growing up, we didn't really have too many role models. In a sea of blue and black and brown, we were the only ones that were wearing pistols and,
But did you try to invisibilize yourself?
I didn't.
Or were you like, this is me and you?
No, I didn't. I didn't try to invisibilize myself at all.
Hello and welcome to Young Turks Reloaded. I'm Shereen Bhan. They say a name says a lot, and it certainly does for my guest today. Her name quite literally means unstoppable, and that's been her career trajectory. It is my pleasure to welcome on the program Arundhati Bhattacharya, one of India's foremost bankers. In fact, the first woman to head India's largest bank, not just the public sector bank, India's largest bank, the State Bank of India. She has many more firsts to her credit, but let me not put words in her mouth. Let's hear her story in her own words. Arundhati Bhattacharya, what an absolute pleasure it is to have you join us here on the Young Turks Reloaded podcast. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much, Shereen. And it's always a pleasure, to talk to you. And I'm actually honored that you've called me for the Young Turks series, because I'm anything other than a young Turk, I'd say.
And here's why. Because who would have thought that after your stint as the chairperson of State Bank of India, you would have decided to have a second innings as the chairperson now of Salesforce. And that's the reason, because you're young at heart and you're not willing to give up.
Well, actually speaking, like everybody else, I didn't have any idea of this career trajectory of mine. I have written a book called Indomitable. And in the last pages of that book, I talk about, what I'm seeing going forward. And I see a range of hills, still waiting for me to climb. I had never imagined that this would be one of the hills. But yeah, to that extent, I would say that I love experimenting. I love meeting new people. And the young people that I actually work with today, they really give me a lot of energy. So yes, it's been an adventure and something that I think, I'm very glad I undertook.
Well, and that's exactly why you're here on the Young Turks podcast. But let's go back to those many hills that you have climbed and traversed and peaked as well. And let's start. I want you to recount the day that you walked into the State Bank of India at 22 as a probation officer. This was sheer chance. You wouldn't have considered a career in banking if it was not for your friend who decided to get you to take that exam, which you then took. But that moment when you walked into State Bank of India, relive that for us.
Well, that actually, if I relive it, as you know, we used to join at the staff college in Hyderabad, in Begumpet, and we joined in batches. So I was still doing my post-graduation. The courses at that point of time were a little delayed on account of the problems of Naxal problems that Bengal was having. So our examination still hadn't taken place. Our classes had just got dissolved. And 3 days later, I was supposed to get on a train to go to Hyderabad. And my brother came to see me off because my parents were in Bokaro and I was in Calcutta. And he had strict instructions from my father to ensure that he found somebody on the train who'd sort of look
Chaperone you.
Yeah, to chaperone me. And my brother looked around the platform and he found one guy who looked, like he's a very serious kind of person, surrounded by his family. And he said, that guy also must be going to join the same program. Let me go and find out. And he found out, and it was actually one of the guys who came along and who is my batchmate. So that's the way I met my first batchmate on the platform. And my hostel mates had come to see me off. And I tell you, they embarrassed the life out of me because I had a single ladies coupe. There was nobody else in that. And they literally, this was the first time I was going in first class, not by paying anything because the bank was paying my fare.
Right.
And they sort of really lived it up. There was no song that they didn't sing, whether it is English, Hindi, Bengali, and they were literally bouncing on the seats. And I was trying to control them that, look, you can't do stuff like this. And they were like, so what? And anyway, so this guy then, after the train started, he came to sort of say hi to me and see that I was well looked after. And the moment he entered, the conductor came running and he said, this is ladies coupe, how are you here? Get out. So before even, we could talk a few sentences, he was ushered out. So I realized that I was being well looked after. So that was my first journey. And then, of course, I joined the SBI. The actual entry to the branch was far worse. Like in the staff college, we were really well looked after. So we had white-coated, white-gloved waiters coming in the morning and pouring our tea. And believe me, this coming from Jadavpur hostel, where I used to have morning tea in a cracked cup. Okay, that was the...
So this was the epitome of luxury.
Exactly. It's a white-gloved waiter, for heaven's sake, pouring out your tea for you. And then, of course, you come down to the branch. And it so happened I was positioned in Alipur branch, which at that point was India's largest treasury branch.
Okay.
Because it used to look after the entire 24 paraganas, which, by the way, now have been divided into two districts, north and south. And it was Panchami, that is 2 days before the Durga Puja.
Okay.
And as you know, just before the Durga Puja, all the bills get paid. So government bills, government checks, there was a huge crowd in front of the branch. And I was trying to get in through the back door and the guy was sort of guarding it. And I showed him my letter and I said, I'm joining. The moment he realized another fresh set of hands, everybody
grabbed you.
Yeah, more work to be done. And I was plunked into a seat. And I was told all that you have to do is we will pay the checks and we will send it across to you. And you have to number it 1 to 25 in 3 duplicates. So you have to put carbon paper in between and write really hard so that it shows. And you have to put all those 25 checks down and add them. You cannot believe, just trying to add 25 rows of numbers, 4 and 5 started making 7 and 3 and 2 started making 6. After a little while, I didn't know what I was doing. And then somebody comes and suddenly opens my drawer and plonks something in and goes away. And I'm like very offended. What the hell? How can somebody come and touch a lady's drawer kind of thing, and take it, means open the table thing. So I told them that, what is this? And another guy, a more or less seasoned veteran, he looked at me and said, that's what will keep you alive. So I wondered what it was. I opened it and it was a packet of, jhalmuri, which Bengal is famous for. So I said, what this? So he said, yeah, you will not.
Superfood.
Yeah, superfood. And he says, you will not have time to leave your desk till 8 in the evening. If you want to survive, every once in a while, have a fistful of that and it will keep ulcers at bay. So, that was my
Try it by fire.
Yeah. And imagine, after having been sort of really looked after in staff college, you come and face, and then if you saw the crowds that day, they literally had to have policemen keeping the crowds at bay. And in those days, we used to have these nets in front of the cashier's desks. We were sitting behind the cashier's desk because and what was happening was they were paying the checks as quickly as possible. They were being put in, waste paper baskets, and they would simply get poured onto your desk. And you would keep grabbing them and writing them. Okay. Nowadays, all of that is no longer.
I know, that's what I was going to ask you, from the days of carbon papers to now everything being online.
End of the day, my face was filled with black streaks because, while you're changing the carbon, it comes onto your fingers. My hands were aching. My head couldn't even probably add 2 plus 2. So, the first day was like one whirlwind. I can't even remember what it was like. And by the way, I was at that desk for, I think, about 3 weeks before I got changed. And in 3 weeks, I managed to have a corn on my finger in trying to write really, really hard, So that's the way it was in the beginning.
And this really brings me back to, I think, things that so many of us, and, we've had it a lot easier than your generation. We had you probably had nobody to look up to in terms of role models, in terms of mentors. I remember a conversation that I had with Indira Nui, and she said when she was going to her first interview, she didn't even know what would be appropriate for her to wear. And I would imagine that things that we take granted today, bathrooms and so on and so forth, we've heard these stories, but that was the reality then for a woman.
Absolutely the reality. In fact, in that particular branch, there were bathrooms that were labeled as women, ladies, and gents, and executives. Okay, there were 3 classes. And I didn't know whether I was supposed to go to the ladies or the executives. Okay, so I was supposed to be executive. I was also a lady. Which one do I go to? So with a little embarrassed and stuff like that, I asked one of the ladies, where do I go? And she said, no, you have to use the branch manager's toilet. I said, what do you mean? So there is a attached toilet for the branch manager. She said, all lady executives go to that one. So I said, you mean I just walk into the branch manager's room and go there? She said, yeah, do that. So, I walked in and the branch manager had met me, of course, and he looked up and he had a customer, and the customer looked up and I didn't look at either of them and I walked straight. The way back again, I looked the other way and walked straight out. Like, it was horrible, absolutely. But that's the way it was in those days.
Yes, that was the reality. But, let's talk a little bit about that. Making your way through the ranks of SBI to the top. State Bank of India, and I don't think people understand the magnitude of that decision of putting you as the chairperson. I want to understand what that process was like of actually going through the interview and, the enormity of being in that position. Again, people don't realize how large State Bank of India really is. When did you believe that this was something that you truly wanted to do?
So, when we joined at Hyderabad, we had a lot of seniors coming and addressing us in those first 10 days of orientation. And one of them said that, the chairman who's there today joined just like you as a probationary officer, and so have many others. So who knows? And, that night, as we were going to sleep, I'm sure this thought must have come to every one of us in our batch, that who knows, maybe one of these days I could be one too. And of course, as you then go into the routine of day to day, you forget it. It becomes like a distant star. You don't even think about it. But when it begins to sort of come together and gel is by the time you are CGM, you are then beginning to play that game of snakes and ladders. If this moves up, then I get there. And then, what happens to somebody else? And, you begin to start thinking whether it's a possibility. And I thought it was a possibility because I had the years. That is, in those days, you couldn't appear for an interview unless you had 2 years remaining. And I had joined very young. I had joined at the age of just 21 and a half. So I had tenure that was required. And so to that extent, maybe when I was CGM or DMD, it
became to become real.
Yeah, a possibility, a reality, no, a possibility, yes. And then you begin to think, if you did get there, what would be your agenda? What would you do? How would you do things differently?
And so you actually crafted a 6-point strategy that you took with you to the interview.
Yes, I did. And the people on the interview committee were a little disappointed that NPA wasn't the first on that list. But I explained to them, and risk, by the way, was first on the list, but not NPA. So I told them actually the reason why NPA is not first.
And for those who are watching, NPAs, to come back to the point that you actually made in your book very often, that acronyms are thrown about. So
yes.
we're going to de-jargonize NPAs. We're talking about non-performing assets. So go ahead, ma'am.
That's true. So, everybody was so, caught up in the non-performing asset story at that time. And yes, it was a huge burden on the banking system, huge burden on the economy. All of that goes without saying. But what I told them is that, NPAs are something that we already know has happened. What we know has happened is not what we should worry about. We just have to go about acting in order to resolve them. But what we need to do is to stop this wave. If you don't stop the waters from coming on, the flood will continue.
Yeah.
So to stop the flood, you have got to dam up the waters. And that you cannot do unless you have the rest 5 points that I put on my agenda, including risk, including cost controls, including your customer satisfaction, including technology. So all of those form very large parts of what I wanted to do. But yes, I think I did have some framework of what I was going to do. But I think that framework really expanded once I actually got into the role.
Yes, it did expand, and you went through a very difficult period as far as the banking sector was concerned, and you managed to navigate that as well. And I want to understand from you, through that difficult period where tough decisions needed to be taken, where the cleanup was warranted, where consolidation also became something that you needed to look out for and look after. What was that period like for you, and what has that taught you about what we need to now focus on as far as India's banking sector is concerned?
So one thing that it really taught me is that it reinforced my belief that unless you have a very strong technology backbone, it would be very difficult for us to keep on top of our game. Okay, the times when you could intuitively do things were over. If you really wanted data, you had to constantly triage the data to understand that they are really reliable. If you are looking at the non-performing assets, why were we not able to control them at the outset? Because the data quality wasn't good enough for us to have a clear understanding of where this particular unit was. For instance, people would give us stock statements. Now, in the stock statements, how much of that stock is slow moving?
Yeah.
How much of that stock is not going to fetch you anything or will have to be sold at much lower rates? There's no way of finding out. Okay. So whatever is the valuation that's being given to you, you have to take that at face value. Think of, say, some of these mining companies. If they give you a stock statement, this is the amount of, mined ore that I have. You look at the mountains of ore. Can you possibly make out what is there and what is not there?
Yeah.
Or what is below the mountains or what is inside the mountain? No way that you can do any of those things. So you have to actually make out the state of that particular company by looking at other data points, looking at how much is the electricity they're consuming, looking at how much are the payments they are making to suppliers, looking at what their actual, turnover looks like. By by considering their bank accounts and the kind of payments that they are getting. So there are loads of data points over there. And if you triage all of them, the taxes they are paying, that's another major data point. So if you look at all of them and you put them all together, then the story sort of really gives you shape to what you are thinking and how right you are.
So would you say that, of course, many of the other decisions that were taken, many of the other measures that were taken to ensure that we clean things up as far as NPAs are concerned, but technology and the use of technology has been crucial to not just addressing the NPA problem, but also ensuring that the waters don't come back, as you pointed out?
That's absolutely right. The more the technology we use, the better will be the quality of the decisions that we are taking. We were taking decisions not based on, data that was verified. We were taking it based on data that was being supplied, but not data that had been verified. And I think that was the gap. We needed to close that gap. And I think, most of the banks have managed to do that because it's important that we do it. Otherwise, we are going to get into problems going forward again.
Well, speaking of problems and the problems and challenges that that face Indian banks and the banking sector in general, and we've gone through many phases, but banks are at perhaps their strongest that they have ever been in the last few years, both in terms of profitability as well as in terms of the strength of the balance sheet. What do you see as the key challenges ahead of India's banking sector today?
So, Indians' banking is actually evolving. I talked about it to you in our Reinforce as well, that, we had been dependent on deposits for a very, very long period of time. That is going to change because the people who were putting deposits in the banks now have many other places to put it in. Just like, I had very little choice of the kind of job I would take. So also people have today a lot of choice as to where the deposits can go. Same way, they have a lot of choice of what jobs they'll do. The kind of jobs that are done today. For instance, the other day, one of the gentlemen that I was talking to, he very proudly claimed that his daughter was an influencer. And believe me, there was no job description like influencer even 5 years back. Okay, not at least in India. So I was quite surprised. And he was really proud about it.
Yeah.
That, she was doing this and she was doing it so well. So similarly with deposits, bank deposits, people will still continue to keep because they understand that liquidity is required, but it will not be the default option. Okay. As these younger people, they mature and they get more money in their hands, they will use all kinds of avenues in order to make investments. They will make investments in the real sector. So whether it be commodities, land, they will be making investments there. They will obviously make investments in the market. And you are seeing the way the mutual funds are growing, the direct equity markets are going, and they're growing. And they're saying actually that, the DFIs are now almost, equal participants as the FIIs. And the DFIs are getting money from the retail investors only. So that's going to happen. Now, as that happens, banks will also have to move from just being deposit-oriented to actually also borrowing in the market and understanding how they should borrow in order to still retain their margins. That's on one hand. On the other side, if you look at the demand for loans, there also we are going to see, there has already been a quantum change on the retail side.
Yeah.
On the corporate side, though, while the retail side is being very strongly digitized in order to enable banks to handle volumes, on the corporate side, digitization is in comparison is still low. And that is where I think banks need to really focus on, because again, as I told you, it's the quality of the data that's going to determine how well we do on the corporate side of the lending piece. And there, I think there is much that banks can still do. They need to really up their game, digitizing the corporate side of the, lending platform. Over and above that, I think, we also have to understand that today it's not only banks that are your competitors.
No.
There are so many others.
Apple is your competitor.
Exactly. So, to that extent, you have to understand that there are competitors just popping out of the woodwork, so to speak. How do you keep ahead of the game? And there, I think the best way is that all of these fintechs, they have technology, they have solutions, They look at particular pain points of a customer and address that pain point. And that's how they get their customers. These are pain points that the banks know about, but it's a take it, leave it attitude.
Yeah.
They've got to get rid of that attitude. That is not going to work. So in every single process, we have to understand where it's hurting the consumer, the customer, and then address those. Very simple, I'll tell you. The language that the banks use is still inside out. If you look at your passbook, it's still debit and credit. How many people, you go to a rural area, ask them what is a debit and what is credit? It may be written in Hindi or in some regional language. It's still debit and credit that's written over there. Instead of that, why don't I call it deposit and withdrawal? Very simple. Simplify it. Some banks have, others haven't. So, simple little things like this, these are pain points. If you look at the statements that you receive or the passbooks that you receive, the, gobbledygook that's written in the column that is meant to describe your transaction makes no sense. So banks will have to do something in order to address these very simple issues because, consumers are like water. They will go wherever there is least resistance. There will be a little bit of holdback there because consumers also are interested in security.
Yeah. And trust matters when you talk about banking
that's
specifically.
Right. Yeah. So I think that is exactly the point. The point of trust. Banks have the trust of the people. If they can only punch in the agility and the customer awareness of the fintechs, or at least do this in collaboration with the fintechs. They bring the solutions and the customer awareness. Banks bring the trust and their customer base. If the two come together, that would be a really good...
possible realistically, as far as public sector banks are concerned? Forget private sector banks. For public sector banks, forging partnerships with fintechs, because as you pointed out, they've been able to identify the pain points and provide solutions as well. Agility, not something that we associate with public sector undertakings. Do you believe that there is a possibility of forging this partnership?
I think there is. We did quite a bit when I was there, and I'm sure my successors have been continuing that. They are not still into the core banking areas. They are there as partners in the peripheral areas. But I think there are ways and means in which, they can be sort of incorporated in the entire ecosystem so as to form a very strong
Give me an example.
Today, for instance, partnerships are already there in respect of sourcing of loans, okay? But not in providing technology, okay? So maybe that is one area they could look at. They could also look at areas like, the peripheral stuff that we do with, giving them investment avenues, giving them things like credit cards, other services that could actually be done by them at lower costs and in a more agile manner. How could they possibly sort of partner the banks with all of that? I think there are many, many ways in which these partnerings can take place.
Since we're talking about PSBs or public sector banks, and I think you've probably answered this question many times during the course of your career. What is it about the public sector that often carries this perception of not being good enough, not being agile enough, not being responsive enough? And do you believe then that privatization is the answer? Do you realistically believe that privatization will ensure that India's public sector banks are much more customer-centric, are better run, are better managed?
So I don't really believe that is the answer, if you ask me. Because there was a particular reason for which the public sector banks existed. And we saw that reason in full display even when the Prime Minister Jan Dhan Yojana was being done. It was meant for financial inclusion. If you look at the participation of the private sector in that initiative as compared to that of the public sector, the public sector was miles ahead, okay? Because it meant actually investing money in order to bring those accounts onto your books.
Yeah.
Those accounts would, grow multifold and give you a lot of returns, but the private sector is unwilling to make that initial investment. That initial investment was still something that the public sector, undertook, because again, that was part of the role that we are in, right? Now, if you ask me whether the solution to this idea that we were not agile enough is in privatization? I think not. If you look at the way we digitized, and by the time I left State Bank of India, YONO was launched about a month and 10 days after my retirement. I would say at that point of time, YONO was far ahead of the rest of the industry, whether it be public, private, or foreign banks. We were far ahead. Okay. So if we could do something like that, being in the public sector, there's really no reason why public sector needs to sort of be considered as something that's not agile enough or hanging back. But, at the end of the day, there is still perception and there is reality. And I often joke with my friends with my current colleagues that once I leave the organization, I'm going to write another book called Busting Private Sector and Public Sector Myths and Realities.
Let's start here. Chapter 1 on the Young Turks podcast. Let's bust some of those myths.
No. So one myth is that, people don't work in the public sector. Total myth. In the public sector, the last 4 years of my life, and this is true throughout, okay? In the last 4 years of my life, at least, I never went to sleep before 1:30 in the night.
1:30 at night?
Yeah, never ever. And sometimes I woke up at 3, sometimes I woke up at 4, sometimes at 6:30. That's when I used to wake up. It's become such a bad habit. Even today, I'm not able to go to bed before 12. I'm trying very hard to...
But why was that the case?
Because, the number of files that I had to clear throughout the morning, during the office hours, I would be having either customer meetings or internal meetings. Okay. I would have no time at all to look at the files. And then, I would come back home. I was supposed to be carrying a briefcase back home. I came back with 2 middle-sized suitcases and I had to clear all of those files, They are far worse than the British, the boxes that accompany, that you must have seen in Westminster. They're far, far worse than that. They're big, solid suitcases filled with files. And
this is every day?
Every day. Every single day. And the thing is, I'd come back home at around 9:30, take a break till 10:30 or so. At 11, I would sit down with the files, and I very rarely went to sleep before 1:30. Otherwise, most of those files wouldn't get cleared. Okay. So you're reading, you are understanding, you are commenting, you are approving whatever it is that you have to do on those files through those hours. So it's a really, really tough time. And not only that, I continue to tell these people, you'll see a lot of memes about lunch hours in public sector banks, especially SBI, very, very unfortunate, but it's there. But, I served the SBI for 40 years and 1 month. I never ever had 1 hour for lunch ever. Okay. Most of the time it was lunch at your desk. Okay. Hurriedly had in 10 minutes time, or it would be a working lunch in a meeting where, though I used to get food from home, my food would be warmed up and given to me. And by the way, because I used to have food from home, a lot of people started bringing food from home, all very healthy habits. But the fact of the matter is we used to eat together while sitting in the boardroom at the board table, discussing various things. We never had lunch hours. I don't even know. I'm sure people take lunch hours, but I don't think we really deserve what goes on social media. Well, at least I don't think most of us deserve it. Maybe a few.
No, I'm sure that there are, of course, and that might hold true even as far as private sector banks or private sector in general.
Private sector, by the way, is different. They block on your calendar 1 hour. And you are expected to respect that 1 hour. Nobody disturbs you during that 1 hour. That's exactly what I'm trying to say. That's a myth. That, the private sector doesn't get lunch hours. It's even in my calendar today, I can show you that 1 hour is absolutely blocked. Then it's my choice whether I want to talk to somebody or the other. But the calendar blocks it and nobody will send me a request for a meeting then, or nobody will call me during.
Okay, so myth number 1, busted that the public sector doesn't do any work. What's myth number 2?
The other myth, I think, in the public sector is that people are very laid back, that they are not agile enough. Again, I don't think it's that. I think it's the processes that we need to follow. We are agile enough. We know the challenges. We know how things are to be tackled. But
the process is the punishment.
Yeah, absolutely. And you have to abide by the process. Because the moment you break that, you actually put yourself at enormous risk. And it's not worth doing. So that is the thing. Whereas in the public sector, I think they have far more leeway in how they will process something. If they are really convinced that something is good and it needs to be proceeded on very, very quickly, they have the ability to do that because, well, they have the delegation of powers to enable them to do that.
I want to address a separate myth, not public or private sector, but a myth that women are not risk takers or women are risk averse. And I want you to address that.
Again, I would say that this is true of every, of every gender. Okay, there are risk takers and there are risk averse. I can show you as many risk averse men as there are women in my current organization. And similarly, the other side, as many risk takers, women as men. See, what happens is women are fewer in the organization and therefore they stand out. Now, out of that, even if, say, there are 3 women, even if one of them become averse to taking risk, she stands out. And the myth sort of perpetuates itself. I don't think it's the case at all. It's a question, it's totally, individual, ability, and not only ability, the propensity of individuals as to how they want to take their career forward. The second thing that's maybe perpetuating this is women, I think, have a habit of second guessing themselves. Because
Did you do that? Do you do that?
Oh, yeah, sometimes I do. And also, I think, we take what we do very seriously.
Yeah.
So we don't want to feel guilty that we are not doing one role well. So you want to be good at everything. Okay. Now, when you're trying to be good at everything, you end up not being very good in anything. Okay. So that is, again, I think, one of the things that women really have to think about. For instance, if you look at my home, I don't know what I'm going to eat in the evening. I don't know what shopping is getting done. I've given up the entire household management to the staff that I have. Okay. If I was doing all of that, including my work, I'd be in a loony bin. There's no other place that I would be able to be in. So you have to choose what you will
prioritize
do and what you will not do. Like, don't sweat the small things is so important for us. Sometimes we end up sweating the small things, and that, I think, is something we can avoid doing. But we have a tendency to do it. I would accept that we have a tendency.
But this second guessing, and I completely relate to that because I do it very often as well. Where do you believe that comes from? Do you believe it comes from the fact that there is this, it's internalized, the fact that you think that you are going to be judged, that you are going to be scrutinized, that you're perpetually being judged and scrutinized, and hence this performance pressure. Where do you believe that this second guessing business comes from?
So, as you rightly said, when we were growing up, we didn't really have too many role models. Okay. We didn't see women really being successful. Okay. We didn't know of women who had managed both and still done a great job. And because of that, the scrutiny was actually far more on us. It's not only that we thought we were being scrutinized, we actually were being scrutinized. And again, as I said, because we sort of stuck out, in a sea of blue and black and brown, we were the only ones that were wearing pastels and,
But did you try to invisibilize yourself? I
didn't.
Or were you like, this is me and you?
No, I didn't. I didn't try to invisibilize myself at all. In fact, if you go to State Bank headquarters, and there are the portraits of all the chairmen, and the day they told me that somebody is coming to, take your picture so that they can paint it, I deliberately put on a red sari. So if you'll see my portrait over there, it's in red.
Statement.
Yeah, it's in red. Because everybody else is in black and blue and brown. So I didn't want to be in any of those colors. I wanted to be red because I wanted to stand out. So yeah, I didn't want to do that because, and frankly speaking, I love wearing lovely saris. That's something that I've always loved doing. And I wouldn't be able to do that if I stuck it to those colors, right? So yeah, you were being scrutinized. You were being held up, to a lot of, what should I say?
Preconceived ideas.
Yeah, absolutely. You were sort of measured against benchmarks which were not really realistic. All right. And again,
but has that really changed today? How much has it changed?
I think it has become less, but whether it has completely changed, I wouldn't say so. I don't think we are where we need to be, But we've made progress. That much is sure. We have made a lot of progress. I see quite a few women in leading roles today. In the IT sector, you see a lot of women heading IT institutions. You wouldn't have seen this many, say 10 years back. There would have been absolutely no way that we could have got there. And at one point of time, even in the banking sector, we had a lot of women.
Yes.
So I think, it has changed slowly over the years. It is changing still. Not there yet.
But, I want to understand from your own experience, and the debate rages on about work-life balance. Now, it almost makes it sound as if these are two mutually exclusive compartments, but that's not how it is. It's messy. As you pointed out, you would come back home and you'd start working again at 11 p.m. at night. So when we talk about work-life balance, what has been your approach? What would you tell a young mother, for instance, who's, looking at her career progression today? What advice would you give?
So again, I said, you have to prioritize what you want to do. Okay. You have to not get into very micro details, whether it be at work or it be at the family front. You have to have teams that really support you well. You have to get the right people for the right roles. As you grow in leadership, you will find that you will have teams to work with. You've got to trust them. You've got to delegate. And you've got to believe that if you step away for a little while, they will automatically close the breach, which means that you don't keep things to yourself, that you are transparent in what you are doing. And this is true of the family front as well as the work front, mind you. I'm not only talking about the work front, right? So I've always felt that having that support of the teams, whether at work or at home, has made a big difference in my life. So, and also you've got to ask for help. Many a times, you will find that you need to get certain things done. You just don't have the bandwidth to get it done. You have to ask for help, no matter where you are. So, the balance is not, compartmentalizing these two and trying to do the best that you can in both. The balance comes because you know what is it that you need to do and what is it that the others can do. You trust them and you trust them to do it well. Believe that, others can do it just as well as you can and maybe better. Surround yourself with good people. Okay. Sometimes I keep telling my colleagues, I always make sure that people more intelligent than me are actually surrounding me. So, be comfortable in their presence and allow them, once you have set the goal or the vision, once you have sold it to them and you know that they are subscribing to it, allow them their space. They will come up with so many ways, in order to bring your vision alive. Only it's not true that you alone can bring your vision alive. And that way you can get so much more done. If you look at the 4 years that I was chairman, there were so many initiatives we did, starting from the mundane, getting the State Bank building to look far better because we did certain things to the exterior that makes it look clean and nice now. So starting from that to things like performance management, changes there, which had never been done in the 200-year history of SBI, to digitizing the bank, to looking after NPAs, to also setting up the foundation and doing a very differentiated CSR work. So we did a lot of things, including publishing 2 books. One on the living, we called it the living heritage, which was the buildings that SBI owned, talking about that, and another book on water. Because water resources, I believe, were extremely important for the country. So we did it all. And you think I did everything? Not at all. It was the team that was executing. But I had to give them certain ideas and they would run with it. And as they run with it, they come with ideas that, reinforce your ideas and enrich them. So allow them to have that, that is their achievement. So as you do that, you'll find, more and more streams sort of join into the main river. And it gets bigger and bigger.
No, absolutely. And I think that is a crucial aspect of true leadership. But, I want to dwell a little bit more on your personal journey, because I think this is something that will resonate deeply with people. And I think this is a challenge that many women particularly cope with, of maternity and balancing the needs of maternity with your aspirations as far as your career is concerned. And it wasn't easy for you either. You did consider the possibility of exiting the workforce because you have a specially able daughter and you felt that you would not be able to do your best for her. What made you not give up? And as you look back today, what is it that you would like to share with people? And I go back again to young women who are navigating a very difficult, aspect of their lives. These are tough decisions to make.
Yeah, I agree. And yeah, I did at one point of time think that I should give up. And in fact, I'm very grateful to one of my seniors who I consider as a mentor. He was the CGM of Bengal Circle, and later on he became the chairman of SBI as well, Mr. M.S. Verma. So I called him actually when I was at that crossroads, wanting to understand whether I should give up or give it a try. And he very categorically told me that there's no way you should give up. You have to try to the very end. Giving up is very simple. It's a 30-second email that you can put in order to resign. Just go there, make an attempt. If it doesn't work, that option is always open. I would also say that what I thought within myself was that if my daughter needs special support, how will I be best enabled to give it to her? Is it by staying in the job or is it by leaving? By leaving, what I will be able to do is internally in the house, I'll be able to provide her company, provide her companionship and all of that. But if I look at the world outside, the world is not a very easy place. Just by being inside, will I be able to give her that support that she might need in the external world? And in my mind, I thought that it was important for me to stay in that external world in order to be able to support her. I also believe, that a fulfilled person is a much better person to have at home rather than one who keeps sort of thinking that he or she has made a sacrifice.
Yeah.
A sacrifice is not something that you make willingly. You do it because it has to be done. But somewhere in the core of your being, there is a little tinge of bitterness that, by the way, becomes more as time goes on. And I didn't want that. I didn't want to feel bitter about something, and I wanted actually to feel that, happy about things. I wanted it to be, I wanted to give her the strength of mind to see that, yes, you can do a lot of things in spite of a lot of challenges. And after considering all of this, even now I think that women who are undergoing this, I would tell them that, it's good for you to be a role model to your child, because your child will want to grow up into a strong human being. And you yourself, if you are not displaying that strength, you don't know what the child will be able to do or not do. It's everybody's own way of doing things, and I completely respect it. A lot of people take time off. A lot of people change their, way of working. They start working from home. They do things independently. They become entrepreneurs. All of this is acceptable. The only thing that I'm asking is women need to feel fulfilled. If you are fulfilled in doing, staying at home and being a homemaker, great. Just go ahead and do it. But do not think of it as a sacrifice. If you're thinking of it as a sacrifice, don't do it, please. That's all that I have to say.
No, and I think that's very important, that distinction that you make. But, as we look at increasing the participation of women in the workforce, and we're going through a very difficult time globally today where people are now talking about why should we have diversity, why do we need to focus on inclusion and so on and so forth. And do you believe that we're at a crossroads where we perhaps will see a setback on the progress that we've made so far? Does it worry?
Yeah, actually it does worry me. It does worry me because we seem to have made some progress, and there seems to be a tendency to allow it to slide. And I think that is something that's very, very regrettable. And we must not allow it. Because this is not something that can at all be, justified in any manner whatsoever. Your bottom lines of the balance sheets of the banks or any other organization say that the more diverse the workforce, the better are the outcomes. Okay. And I'm seeing it everywhere. I'm seeing it in my current organization. I've seen it in my earlier organization. Diversity is very important. If you look at nature, if you look at even Eastern philosophy, what does it talk about? It talks about nirvana. What is nirvana? Nirvana is balance. where you are neither impacted by anything good nor impacted by anything bad. Okay, you are totally balanced in whatever you are. Now, balance is what the entire universe is based on. So if you don't have balance in your workforce, in your life, then something is wrong. You need to strive for balance. So I don't think this is an agenda that any country should give up, or any organization should give up. In fact, I think we need to strive more and more to bring about that balance. Is very essential.
Well, talking about bringing about that balance, you brought in some changes as far as SPI is concerned to try and ensure that you retain or curb attrition. Practically, what has been the big learnings, the big lessons on what are the things that work to ensure that we actually have a much more balanced and diverse workforce, and what keeps that culture going as well?
So I think we need to cultivate a culture of empathy more than anything else. Because while I did give the sabbatical for elderly care and child care, I don't think I went far enough. Because what happens when you take a sabbatical is you actually lose seniority. So when you come back, you become junior to the people that you had joined with, which is not ideal. That's very upsetting for people who really are ambitious or who want to do things.
Yeah.
It's upsetting. So today what we really are looking at is not only a hybrid workplace where women can stay at home for the period they want and then come back, but also flexible hours. So women can work at hours which are different from the regular hours because they are free in certain periods of time. And I believe if done well with empathy, this can be a win-win for everybody, in the sense that you are not then actually falling off the workforce. You are remaining with the workforce. You are updated with everything that is coming. The organization gets far more hours of work in because, you are not closed after a particular period of time.
Yeah.
There is still a workforce that addressing things at that particular point of time. And that's so the organization wins, the employee wins, and the customer also wins. Because at the end of the day, it is much better for the customer to talk to a person who's already in the system, trained in the system, instead of that's this person attriting and some new people coming in. So I think overall, this is something that is good for everybody. The only thing is, as I said, you need an empathetic kind of mindset to understand how to do this. And I also want to sound a word of warning that given a chance, people do misuse certain facilities. We should be careful about that. And women especially should be very, very conscious of the fact that, there are a lot of things that are being done in order to make their lives more livable, or for them to stay on in the workforce. That should not be misused in any manner whatsoever.
Yeah, you're right in pointing that out. But, I want to come to the latest development, and that is the fact that you've been awarded the Padma Shri, one of India's highest civilian honors. So congratulations on that. And I didn't realize it, that you're the first, not just the first woman banker, but the first public sector banker in India after 70 years of banking in this country to be awarded the Padma Shri.
That's right. And that's why, I was really grateful. I was really grateful and humbled because no other public sector banker has been acknowledged. And I think the public sector has done a yeoman's job in ensuring financial inclusion, in ensuring that we bring banking to every corner of the country. Like, we have taken servers on the back of elephants to various branches. Okay, we have trekked 28 kilometers to get to branches. The last branch on the Nepal border didn't have a road leading up to it. You have to actually trek 28 kilometers to get there. We've taken, servers on boats to Lakshadweep and the Andaman Islands, literally, braving the waves. So we've done so many things. During demonetization, there was no form of transport that we didn't use, including, maybe some from the defense forces, especially when we were going into the Northeast, the very inaccessible places in the Northeast. So we've done all of this, but there's never been a person that's been acknowledged from that sector. I hope that this opens the gates, so to speak, and there'll be many others that will follow.
You believe this goes back again to the perception issue that we were talking about of the public sector not being good enough, the public sector not doing enough? Is it a perception problem, and how do you address that? How do you change the perception? Of course, by improving the quality of service is one aspect, but when you're dealing with a legacy issue, how do you change it?
So, perceptions are things that people sort of have in their minds today, because we are able to address individuals far more through social media, etc. Changing of perceptions is probably a little better, but it's still very fickle. Social media makes you think somebody is on the top of everything, and the next minute they will pull you right down. So, it's a fickle kind of a medium with which to address it. But I think what the public sector needs to do, we have to understand we are a service organization. In a service organization, you deal with human beings. And human beings, the quality of the service cannot be determined in a cookie-cutter manner. It will differ from person to person. When a person is coming to serve you at the front line, that particular person may have had a really bad time while coming to office, or had a fight at home before coming to office. That baggage, you cannot tell them to sort of simply shed and put on a plastic smile and be very careful and, look at your needs, in a manner that you feel that you're really valued. I think the way to go about this is more and more digitization. That is what will probably enable us to give a far better quality of service. When, it will not be something that will be determined by that particular person's human baggage at that particular point of time. It will be determined more by the systems that will tell you, that will prompt you, this is what you need to say, this is what you need to do, these are the steps, just do them and it will happen. So, those kinds of things, as they start coming in more and more, I think things will change. But having said that, the very strange thing for public sector banks, I did a kind of a dipstick study to understand from the youth, not the youth, we were looking at about 35-year-olds.
Okay.
And we were asking them whether
35 is still young.
That's still young. So we were asking them if they ever had a account with SBI. And they said, yeah, we used to have one. And most of them, when they were asked, why did you have an account? And quite a few of them said, when we took our education loans. And we asked why, and they said, no, SBI is very sympathetic and, it's easier to get the education loans from them and all. And then what happened? Then they passed out and they got a cool job and they opened their accounts in a cool bank. And cool bank is not SBI. Okay. So I said, okay, fine, you open it in a cool bank. And what happens? Do you ever come back to SBI? And some of them said, yeah, we do, when we take our home loans. I said, and why is that? They said, no, in a home loan, there's no hidden charges, and we sort of trust it. So, at the core of it, the trust is still there.
But you're not cool enough.
Yeah, what is missing is the cool quotient. So, actually...
How do you make SBI cool?
We did make SBI cool with, we did make it cool. And not only that, when I came into SBI, we were not there on any social media. Because at one point of time, it had been tried and we were trolled heavily, and so we retreated. So I said, it doesn't matter. If somebody is trolling us, so be it. At least they're taking the time to tell us something is wrong with us. Let's just go ahead and do it. And by the way, when I stepped out after 4 years, we were number one in Facebook globally. Of course, because China is not there, but we were number one in Facebook in the number of likes in the ranking sector. We were number one on all other social media platforms, excepting on Twitter, where we were number two. Okay. So the fact of the matter is you can change perception. So many youngsters have told me later on also that they are actually, customers of SBI. And we did change. I didn't I didn't do a survey when I left as to what the average age was. But my belief is it means ensure that we brought down the average age of our customers.
Since we're talking about making public sector banks cool, let me ask you this in the context of the transformation that AI is promising to bring about. And now in your current avatar as chairperson of Salesforce, the buzzword today is agentic AI and what agentic AI is going to do to different sectors, including banking. What should we realistically expect? Over the next 5 to 10 years, what happens to bank branches? What happens to people at bank branches? Will agents replace humans? What are we talking about?
So, I look at it in two ways. For the developed world, where there is a shortage of labor on account of the fact that, they just don't have that many young people, this will probably help them plug that gap. In respect of developing countries where there is no lack of labor, okay, what we need to see instead is how can we deepen the services that we are not able to provide at this point of time. If you look at the Jan Dhan Yojana, why were we able to do what we did? Besides the fact that it was run like a program, run like a project, besides all of that, one of the reasons enablers was technology. We had the UIDI, that is your the Aadhaar number, to provide us the KYC, and we had the communications network through mobile. Those were the two basic features because of which, we were able to carry out the financial inclusion program. But even today, if you look at the quality of healthcare that you provide at very many places, including the tier 4 towns, the villages, if you look at the quality of pedagogy, the kind of education that we are able to give them, if you look at the quality of citizen services we are rendering, we are far below what is the minimum standard that is required for a good standard of living, right? So we need to use this technology to empower us to get those services into the people and the people deserve it, right? But we are not going to be able to do it in the brick and mortar manner. We have to use AI and AI agents to be able to deliver it to us. Imagine, for instance, today when you go to a state hospital, how crowded it is. Now, you say that, is it possible for that state hospital, say today it has 200 doctors, can it make it to 1,000 doctors? Because if they make it to 1,000 doctors, they may be able to address everybody. They can't. Okay. There is a limitation. Now, how do you ensure that these 200 doctors, they scale in order to still give a tolerably good quality of service in a manner that the patient doesn't feel even more oppressed, in getting those services? That is where the agents can come in for us. So agents can basically expand your productivity. It can provide you the digital labor that can take away many of the repetitive tasks that you are doing.
The carbon stuff that you grew up doing.
Exactly. But today the carbon stuff is still there. Maybe not as carbons, but merely because the people asking for those services, the numbers have gone up exponentially. And we haven't been able to provide that. Take a call center. A call center is taking 10 minutes to address one of its clients. Okay, 10 minutes is the wait time. They have 200 people in that call center. That company cannot afford to make it 2,000 people in order to address those call centers, those callers in 1 minute's time.
Right.
But what it can do is it can put in agents that will take the repetitive queries and address them so that actually your wait time comes down to 1 minute.
So what does it then mean as far as job creation is concerned? Because you were saying that 200 will not become 2,000 because companies cannot afford it. But will the 200 stay?
Yeah. Not only the 200 will stay, they will actually increase. Because as you give more services, as things are consumed, the demand goes up. If I'm getting better quality education, my demand for more and more of education will go up. And there will be more and more people required for creating content that is better and better. So, the nature of the jobs will change. Today, if I'm a person who's actually teaching, I might become a content creator. I might become an AI trainer. So the quality of your job will change. What you do will change. But whether the jobs will come down, I don't really see it. And actually speaking, we have witnessed this. I remember when the banks were going in for computerization, there was so much of pushback saying jobs will be lost and we will be nowhere. That's not happened. Jobs have kept growing. Maybe not at the pace that we would want it to grow, but they have kept growing. Where have we actually pulled back on the number of jobs? But the banks are now doing so much more. Instead of only borrowing and lending, they are investment advisors, they are sellers of insurance, they are giving so much more of services. They are advisors. There are so many other things that they are able to do. Even loans, the variety of loans that we are able to give. Even in home loans, you probably have 14 varieties of home loans. You have top-up loans, you have old house loans, used house, or rather second-hand, third-hand loans. You have the loans where, there is no houses yet, but you're just booking the loan. So there are varieties of things that we can do because the demand is coming to the fore as you're able to meet the demand. So as you're able to give more and more of services, there will be more and more of demand. And as there is more demand, there will be more jobs.
Since you've been looking at a lot of memes, have you seen the one about Salesforce? What does Salesforce actually do?
So, when I came in, one of my colleagues in one of the public sector banks, had no idea because we were still new entrants. So he asked me, "Do you provide salespeople?" And I said, "Come on," I say, "we are an IT company. We don't provide salespeople." But today I will say that we do provide digital labor.
Digital agents.
Yeah,
Yes.
digital agents. So digital labor is what we do provide. Because I think, the agentic layer that we have today, the autonomous agents, we are by far the leaders in that area. And we do provide digital labor today, yeah.
But this decision to exit India's largest bank and then decide to start afresh in the private sector with an MNC, not in banking, but in a tech company. What made you do that?
Craziness.
Craziness.
Yeah.
The unstoppable Arundhati Bhattacharya.
It's just that, the opportunity came my way. I didn't go looking for it. And Mark was very persuasive. Mark is our founder, Mark Benioff. He was very persuasive. He showed me only one slide when I went to visit him. I couldn't take a decision for 4 or 5 months. So he said, "Enough, this won't go, this can't go on. You come over to San Francisco, meet with all of us, and then decide." So I met with the people and they were really nice, really nice. I wasn't expecting them to be so good, and especially because a banker going and meeting them, I'm sure they must have been very apprehensive. But anyway, he showed me one slide, and that one slide is a donut, which we show even to our customers today, which had all the services that Salesforce gives, including sales, service, marketing, commerce, integration, all of that, analytics, all of that. But in the center was the picture of an actual customer. Okay, that impressed me. And there were 2 other things, when leaving, he gave me a book called Trailblazer. And I read it on the flight. It's a very long flight. So I read it on the flight. And there were 2 stories over there. One was about how he lobbied in order to pay more taxes, in order to make more money available to address the homelessness problem in San Francisco. And as you know, I have dealt with a lot of companies. I have been the chairman of the board of 14 companies myself. While we tried to definitely do the right thing, as per the letter of the law, I had not seen a company that was lobbying to pay more tax. I had not seen it. So that was very impressive for me because obviously they were walking the talk. And the other one was actually on the gender piece because he insisted on an audit. I think this was sometime in 2017 to decide whether there is gender disparity in pay disparity. And his HR told him that if we do find disparity, you'll have to cough up cool cash in order to take care of it. Yeah. So do you really want us to do it? And he was so sure that he wanted to do it. He said, "Go right ahead. And whatever happens, we'll see." And they ended up paying 5 million more. We keep acquiring small companies. There is disparity there or within the company it occurs. And that is an annual audit that we have now, the gender parity, pay parity audit. So that's something that's done annually. So those things really impressed me. So I thought this is a cool company to work in probably. So let's try and bring in that quotient.
The cool quotient continues. But, I also want to ask you, and I would imagine that you've encountered this over the course of your 40-year plus career at SBI. How much of mansplaining did you deal with? And how did you deal with it?
That's a hell of a question, I swear. No, I don't think, you deal with these things in a very direct manner. But it's a question of how you come across to people and how they come across to you and, what you allow and what you don't allow. So I've been in in an environment that has been mainly male for a very long time now. And maybe because of that training, I know exactly how you should deal with many situations.
How do you deal with it?
How do I deal with it? Well, in certain areas I take it head on, and other areas I sort of, say, yeah, this much and no more kind of stuff. So I really can't think of a particular example. I wish I had an anecdote that I could tell you. But no, I don't have an anecdote right now.
So many hills climbed. What next now? What drives you? What motivates you? What keeps you up at night today? What is it that you would like to do?
So what keeps me up at night is, I still think, and I used to think that even when I was in the bank, I still think of it today. It's cyber risk. I think that's something that's really, really, because you are more scared of something that you don't know. You're not scared of something that you know. Okay, you already know it, so you don't. But that is an area of uncertainty, and the world, as it becomes more and more digital, will be subject to more and more of this. Okay, so we have to be careful. Regarding what I should do next, I've been in fact asking people, what should I do next? Because I'm not sure, I do think that, you need to keep reinventing yourself. I think I've done quite a stint. In fact, it's 5 years since I joined Salesforce, or rather close to 5 years.
Yeah.
So it's been a pretty long stint, longer than the SBI chairman stint, though I was 40 years in SBI. But I should probably think about next. I haven't yet begun to think about it. I'm content where I am right now, but let's see. Going forward, who knows?
And this I want to end with this, because again, this comes back to the ideas and notions of how we look at age and how we look at people who have retired, or how we look at retirement itself. This idea of once you retire, it's almost as if you're retiring from life, and you've chosen to go right back and take life head on. So I want to understand from you what the mantra is, and leave us with that.
So it's just that, I think I have a passion for trying and learning as much as I can. And I love to sort of challenge myself in whichever way I can. Maybe it's a little bit of, in fact, my husband says it's a addiction. I need to get rid of the addiction. But I like to be challenged, and I like to sort of
the
challenge
addiction
people
to be
back.
challenged.
Yeah, to be challenged. And I like to challenge people back again. I like to see, something material coming out of whatever I'm doing. As you know, I had a non-executive portfolio in between when I retired until I joined Salesforce. So that was for 1 year, of course, I was on gardening leave, not really doing anything much. A year and a half, I had this non-executive portfolio. But I wasn't too enamored with it, because mainly you aren't making a big difference anywhere. You can't see what you are really achieving. You don't get that sense of, ultimately having done something.
Yeah.
So whatever I do next, I want to have that sense that I'm making a difference. If I'm not making a difference, then probably, it's not worth doing. And it could be a difference to myself also, by the way.
Yeah.
There's so much on my bucket list that I haven't done.
Like what?
So, like learning Sanskrit, for instance. Like
Really?
Traveling a lot. Yeah.
Where would you like to travel to?
Oh, I'd love to travel to so many places in India and abroad. There's a whole big list, I'm trying to sort of knock it off one by one. It's not easy.
So Sanskrit, travel, number 3?
Number 3 would be just, to laze around for a little while and not have something.
That I don't think is possible. Knowing you, I don't think that's possible. Have you ever been able to do that? Stay in bed?
No, that's something, I keep asking, children today, that's our next generation they don't seem to have a body clock that wakes them at a particular period of time. Like their body clock works for 5 days a week. Saturdays, Sundays, they're in bed till 12. And for the life of me, I cannot understand how they can sleep till 12. Like, I wake up still at the same time on Saturdays and Sundays.
Yes, me too.
Yeah, you too. So, our next generation's body clocks are different. On Saturdays and Sundays, the clock is also switched off like any other alarm. And they're happily in bed till 11 and they get up at 11:30, all groggy and all. I can't do it. So, probably, I have to learn more from them as to how they do that and learn to really enjoy and appreciate the time. Probably those are things I still have to learn.
Stay in bed longer. So Sanskrit, travel, and stay in bed longer. The 3 priorities that the indomitable Arundhati Bhattacharya is going to work towards. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much. We wish you the very best of luck with all the future endeavors that you intend to take up. And thanks so much for stopping by here on the Young Turks podcast.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Well, with that, it is time for us to wrap up this fabulous conversation, but we'll be back with a lot more from all of us here on the team. For now, goodbye and many thanks for watching. For more news and updates, all you need to do is follow CNBC TV 18 on all of our digital platforms.